Have you ever witnessed a moment so tense that the entire room seemed to forget how to breathe? The heavy oak doors burst open, the crystal chandeliers trembling beneath the thunder of a notorious boss's voice. "Get this miserable woman out of my sight." That was exactly what Vincent Russo roared at a quiet waitress named Elena. He thought she was just another poor nobody he could crush beneath his heel to show power in front of his men and dangerous associates. He was dead wrong. What happened next was not just a comeback. It was the moment a secret was ripped wide open, an empire began to shake, and the whole room fell silent as the truth was exposed. Listen closely. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the Braga world. Is it United States, London, maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, or anywhere we want to know? And tell us what you learned at the end of this video. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change life. The heavy oak doors of Russo's Prime Steakhouse swung open with a low, resonant creak that cut through the low hum of conversation like a distant warning. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over the deep mahogany tables, their light reflecting off polished silverware and heavy white linens. The air carried the rich aroma of searing prime rib-aged bourbon and faint cigar smoke that lingered from the private lounge upstairs. Located in the heart of Chicago's Gold Coast, the steakhouse was a fortress of old-world American elegance mixed with modern power. It boasted a months-long waiting list, leather banquettes that whispered luxury, and a clientele whose influence could reshape entire neighborhoods with a single phone call. Fortunes were sealed over perfectly grilled steaks here, and silent threats passed with the pour of a fine whiskey. For Elena Thompson, a 32-year-old waitress with tired eyes and calloused hands, this place was simply another battlefield in an endless war for survival. She moved between tables with quiet efficiency, her simple black apron tied tightly around a frame that had grown too thin from months of skipped meals. Her fair skin, once healthy and bright, now carried the pale exhaustion of someone who had not known a full night's rest in years. Elena was not supposed to be here, balancing heavy trays and forcing polite smiles for men who barely glanced at her. 10 years earlier, she had been a promising student at a local community college, studying social work with dreams of helping families like her own climb out of hardship. Life, however, had other plans. Later that night, as the dinner rush began to slow, Elena's thoughts drifted to the small, crumbling apartment she shared with her young daughter on the south side. The wind that howled through the cracked windows on cold Chicago nights carried the distant sounds of the city sirens, shouting the occasional crack of something that might have been fireworks or worse. The building was old, its walls thin as paper, and the heat rarely worked properly. Elena had lost count of how many freezing evenings she had wrapped her little girl in every blanket they owned, humming old lullabies while her own stomach growled in protest. Medical bills from her daughter's severe asthma attacks had piled up like snowdrifts, each one more crushing than the last. The bank had already taken what little they had left after her husband's sudden death years ago in a construction accident. Creditors called relentlessly. Food pantries helped when they could, but the lines were long and the portions never enough. Elena's once bright future had narrowed to a single desperate focus: keep her child alive one exhausting shift at a time. Vincent Russo sat at the head of the largest table in the private dining room, his broad shoulders filling the tailored charcoal suit that spoke of quiet authority rather than flash. Fair-skinned with sharp blue eyes that had seen too much, Vinny was a man born and raised in Chicago's working-class neighborhoods, now living at the pinnacle of success. His legitimate businesses, trucking routes that crisscrossed the Midwest, and construction firms rebuilding parts of the city generated millions. Yet beneath the surface of his calm demeanor churned a storm of unspoken remorse. Old bullet wounds from street confrontations long ago ached on damp nights, reminders of choices that had cost him more than he cared to admit. He had built an empire, but the price had been isolation. Gnawing guilt ate at him in quiet moments, especially when he thought of the woman he had loved and lost years earlier, a kind, resilient soul whose memory still haunted him. He had walked away to protect her from his world, or so he told himself. The remorse never fully left. It simply waited for moments like this to surface. The atmosphere in the steakhouse shifted noticeably when Vinny's associates arrived for what was supposed to be a tense negotiation over expanding trucking territories. A rival faction led by a calculating man known only as Harlan had been encroaching on Vinny's roots with aggressive tactics. The meeting was meant to draw clear lines without open conflict, but the air already felt thick with suspicion. Vinny's usual fixer, A smooth-talking lawyer named Marcus sat to his right, clutching a leather portfolio and offering confident nods that hid his nervousness. Elena approached the table to refill water glasses, her movements precise and unobtrusive. She kept her gaze lowered, voice soft and polite as she murmured, "More water for anyone, sir." The men barely acknowledged her. Vinny, however, glanced up for a brief second. Something in her quiet resilience stirred an old buried feeling, a flicker of recognition that he quickly pushed down. His heart tightened with an unexpected surge. This woman reminded him too much of the one he had failed to protect long ago. The emotion hit him like a sudden weight, fierce, protective, and laced with remorse. He wanted in that instant to shield her from the hardness of the world he knew so well. Yet he said nothing, his face remaining impassive while inner conflict raged. How many times had he chosen power over people, the question burned. As the negotiation began, tensions rose quickly. Harlan's men grew loud and unreasonable, dismissing Vinny's proposals with sneers and veiled threats about taking what they deserved. Marcus stumbled in his responses, his polished words failing to bridge the growing divide. Vinny felt his jaw clench, the old violent instincts rising even as he forced them down. He had promised himself years ago to handle business with restraint, to build rather than destroy. But the unfairness of it all, the way smaller players were squeezed out, the way honest workers suffered, stirred deep anger mixed with guilt. He had once been one of those struggling men on the South Side. Now he sat at the top, yet the remorse for those he had left behind gnawed harder than ever. Outside the steakhouse in the shadowed alley behind the building, a small figure huddled against the brick wall. 8-year-old Mia Thompson, Elena's daughter, had slipped out of their apartment after her mother left for the late shift. She clutched a worn baseball glove, an old keepsake from her grandfather's Little League days, and a small backpack containing her inhaler and a half-eaten sandwich. The night wind whipped through her thin jacket, making her shiver. Her face was pale and malnourished, dark circles under her eyes from too many nights coughing and struggling to breathe. The asthma attacks had grown worse with the cold and the mold in their apartment. Mia had come looking for her mother because the landlord had banged on the door earlier, demanding overdue rent with harsh words that left the little girl terrified and confused. "Where's my mom?" she whispered to herself, fear and anxiety making her small hands tremble. She felt dizzy, the world tilting slightly as hunger and cold numbed her thoughts. Elena stepped into the alley during a brief break, her heart leaping with horror when she saw her daughter there. "Mia, sweetheart, what are you doing here?" Her voice was soft, timid, and filled with protective panic. She knelt quickly, pulling the child into her arms. Mia's body felt too light, too fragile. Tears stung Elena's eyes as the full weight of their poverty crashed down, sleep-deprived nights, empty cupboards, the humiliation of choosing between medicine and food. It was deeply pitiful, this life, that stripped away dignity one cold night at a time. Elena's inner turmoil swelled, fierce love for her daughter mixed with crushing powerlessness. How much longer could she keep them afloat? At that exact moment, Vinny stepped out the back door for fresh air, escaping the stifling tension of the meeting. His eyes locked on the scene. The woman from the table, Elena, and the small girl. Time seemed to slow. Vinny's breath caught sharply. The child's face. The shape of her eyes. A shocking wave of recognition hit him with overwhelming force. This was his daughter. The biological child he had never known existed, born from the brief, passionate love he had shared with Elena's mother years ago before he vanished into his dangerous world to protect them. The revelation struck like a physical blow. His heart pounded with violent emotional conflict, joy at seeing his own blood, horror at the extreme poverty before him, and consuming remorse that nearly brought him to his knees. He had left them to this. The guilt was unbearable, tearing at him with numbing intensity. In that frozen second, an overwhelming surge of love flooded him. Pure, paternal, fierce and protective. No romance, only the raw instinct of a father who had failed and now burned to make it right. Elena looked up, confusion and fear flashing across her face as she recognized the powerful man from inside. Her body tensed with guarded suspicion. Who was he? Why was he staring? She felt disoriented, a wave of dizziness washing over her from exhaustion and shock. Her voice came out timid and polite, barely above a whisper. "Sir, is everything all right?" Vinny's voice, when he finally spoke, was low and steady, though his inner world raged. "You're safe now. Both of you." The words carried the weight of a promise born from years of hidden remorse. He moved closer, not threatening, but shielding, his broad frame blocking the wind. A street confrontation was brewing nearby. Harlan's men had followed him out, voices rising in unreasonable demands about territory. Vinny faced them with calm authority, his presence alone diffusing the immediate threat without raised fists. "This isn't the place," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. The rivals backed off for the moment, but the suspense lingered like smoke. Elena watched in stunned silence her emotions, a whirlwind horror at the danger, anxiety over her child's safety, and a spark of curious confusion about this stranger who seemed to care. Mia peeked from behind her mother, clutching the old baseball glove tighter. The little girl's innocent eyes met Vinny's, and something unspoken passed between them, a fragile beginning of trust. Later that night, as the steakhouse lights dimmed and the city quieted, Vinny arranged discreet transport for Elena and Mia to a safe, warm place far from the drafty apartment. His mind churned with intense inner conflict. The powerful man who commanded respect and fear now felt the sharp sting of responsibility. He had wealth beyond measure, luxurious homes, fleets of trucks, influence that shaped the city. Yet it meant nothing against the image of his own daughter shivering in the cold. The remorse was consuming, driving him to act. Elena, meanwhile, sat in the back of the quiet car, holding Mia close. She felt powerless, yet strangely guarded, her heart torn between deep gratitude and lingering fear. The gap between their worlds felt vast and humiliating. How had her life become this desperate? Yet in the stillness, a tiny seed of hope stirred. Weeks later, small acts of protection began. Vinny ensured medical care for Mia's asthma and quiet assistance with rent, all from the shadows at first. His emotional wounds, old guilt from the violent paths he had chosen, began to ache less sharply whenever he thought of the child's resilience. The father-child bond, still unspoken, grew in quiet moments of condensed emotional stillness. A shared apple pie baked from a simple family recipe, stories of Chicago baseball games, and the warmth of a new coat that finally kept the wind at bay. But the inner turmoil for both adults only deepened. Vinny wrestled with the violent conflict between his empire and the compassion awakening inside him. Elena battled waves of shock and disorientation. How could a man of such power care for someone as broken and impoverished as her? Her misery felt absurdly unfair. Yet his protection offered a lifeline she had never dared imagine. The drama of their lives was only beginning to intensify, pulling at heartstrings with every quiet glance and every unspoken act of kindness. Next morning, the first pale light of dawn filtered through the cracked blinds of Elena Thompson's tiny Southside apartment, casting long shadows across the peeling wallpaper and the threadbare carpet that smelled faintly of dampness and despair. The space was little more than a single room with a cramped kitchenette, where a small hot plate sat beside an empty refrigerator. Wind whistled through gaps in the window frames, carrying the distant rumble of trains and the occasional shout from the street below. Elena had barely slept, her thin frame curled protectively around her daughter Mia on the sagging mattress they shared. The child's breathing was still labored from the night's asthma flare-up, each shallow inhale a painful reminder of how fragile their world had become. Elena's body ached with exhaustion. She was desperately thin, her cheeks hollow from too many days of stretching a single loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter across multiple meals. Sleep deprivation had left dark circles under her eyes, and the constant cold nights had chapped her hands raw. Poverty here was not abstract. It was humiliatingly real. The landlord had banged on the door again the previous evening, his voice loud and unreasonable as he demanded overdue rent with threats of immediate eviction. "You think the world owes you a free ride?" he had snarled, ignoring Mia's frightened whimper from inside. Elena had stood there in her faded coat voice, soft and timid, apologizing profusely while her heart tore with powerless rage. It was absurdly unfair, this endless cycle that stripped away every shred of dignity. She felt the violent inner conflict surge, fierce love for her daughter, clashing with crushing shame at being unable to provide even basic warmth and safety. Later that morning, after walking Mia to a nearby overcrowded school where the little girl clutched her worn baseball glove like a talisman, Elena made her way back to Russo's prime steakhouse. The contrast hit her like a physical blow. The Gold Coast streets gleamed with polished cars and well-dressed pedestrians, while she hurried along in worn shoes that let in the chill. Inside the steakhouse, the luxurious setting felt almost mocking. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above rich mahogany tables dressed in crisp white linens. The aroma of sizzling prime rib and fresh coffee wrapped around her like an unreachable dream. Yet for Elena, it remained a battlefield of polite smiles and heavy trays, her black apron, a uniform of invisibility. Vincent Russo arrived early that day, his powerful presence filling the private dining room as he reviewed ledgers from his legitimate trucking and construction empire. Fair-skinned and impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of quiet wealth, Vinny commanded respect without raising his voice. His businesses spanned the Midwest, generating millions through efficient routes and major city projects. Yet beneath the calm exterior, his heart churned with deepening torment. The previous night's revelation that little Mia was his biological daughter, the child he had unknowingly left behind years earlier when he chose the dangerous path of his world to shield the woman he loved, had unleashed a storm of gnawing remorse. It tore at him violently in quiet moments. How could he have built such success while his own flesh and blood endured such extreme hardship? The guilt was consuming, mixing with an overwhelming paternal love that burned intensely from the first instant he had seen them in the alley. No romance clouded it, only raw, protective responsibility and a fierce determination to heal the wounds his absence had caused. His inner conflict grew more intense. The powerful man who navigated high-stakes deals now felt numb with shock at the disparity, his wealth feeling hollow against Mia's malnourished frame and Elena's exhausted eyes. The high-stakes conflict escalated when Harlan, the ruthless rival faction leader, entered the steakhouse with several associates. Harlan was a calculating antagonist whose greed knew no bounds, pushing aggressively into Vinny's trucking territories with underhanded tactics that squeezed smaller operators and honest workers. The meeting was arranged in the private room to settle boundaries peacefully, but tension thickened the air immediately. Harlan's voice carried unreasonable demands, dismissing Vinny's proposals with sneers about sharing the pie while his men leaned forward threateningly. Vinny sat at the head of the table, his blue eyes steady. Yet inside, violent emotional conflict raged. Every unreasonable word from Harlan stirred old instincts, but Vinny fought them down, haunted by the memory of Mia's pale face. He could not risk open escalation, not when his daughter's safety now weighed on every decision. "We handle this with respect," Vinny said firmly, his tone measured. But Harlan laughed coldly, escalating the drama by questioning Vinny's leadership and hinting at consequences for those who stood in his way. Elena moved silently through the room, refilling glasses with trembling hands. Her poverty made every moment here a study in contrast. While Vinny's world gleamed with luxury plush leather seats, heavy silverware, and the quiet hum of influence, her reality was one of humiliating scarcity. She had skipped breakfast again to ensure Mia had enough for lunch, her own stomach twisting with hunger. At times she felt desperate and powerless. At others, a guarded curiosity flickered when her eyes briefly met Vinny's. Why had this powerful man helped them last night? Fear and anxiety mingled with a spark of hope that left her disoriented, a wave of dizziness washing over her as she stepped back into the shadows. As the negotiation grew heated, Harlan's men grew bolder, their words laced with veiled threats about disrupting Vinny's routes. Vinny felt the inner tearing intensify remorse for the life he had led, clashing with the burning need to protect Elena and Mia. His wealth, displayed in the seamless efficiency of his empire, now felt like a burden rather than a shield. He excused himself briefly, stepping into the hallway where he arranged discreet assistance, a warm coat and medical supplies delivered quietly to Elena's apartment. The act brought a moment of condensed emotional stillness, yet it only deepened his turmoil. How many times had he failed to protect those who mattered? Later that afternoon, after the meeting adjourned with no resolution, Vinny received word of trouble brewing on the streets. Harlan's faction had sent men to harass drivers on one of Vinny's key routes, creating an unexpected confrontation near a Southside warehouse. Vinny moved quickly but calmly, arriving in his understated black sedan. The scene was tense. Rival men blocked trucks, voices raised in bold demands for tribute. Vinny stepped out, his presence alone shifting the atmosphere. "This ends now," he stated firmly, his voice carrying authority without aggression. A brief charged standoff followed, words exchanged, posturing that heightened suspense. But Vinny's calm resolve diffused the immediate threat. His heart, however, pounded with inner conflict. Each confrontation reminded him of the cost of his power, and the image of Mia's trusting eyes from the night before tore at him with fresh remorse. That evening, Elena returned home to find unexpected groceries and a new inhaler on the table, along with a note simply reading, "For Mia." Shock and confusion flooded her. She sat on the edge of the mattress, holding the items with numb hands, tears welling, as the absurdity of her misery crashed down. How could someone of such wealth notice her family's suffering? Her voice, when she whispered to the sleeping child, was soft and timid. "Someone cares, sweetheart." Yet fear lingered. She had learned the hard way that powerful men often came with strings. Horror at their vulnerability, mixed with heightened curiosity, and a slow burning surge of trust. The disparity felt violently disorienting her thin, sleep-deprived body against the safety his resources represented. Inner turmoil ripped through her, once desperately poor, now suddenly glimpsing protection that felt both lifeline and threat. Weeks later, small protections continued. Vinny ensured Mia received consistent medical checkups at a quiet clinic, the bills handled without fanfare. Elena's shifts at the steakhouse grew slightly easier, with occasional extra pay slipped into her envelope. though she remained guarded her polite thanks spoken in a timid whisper when she crossed paths with him. "Thank you, sir," she would say, eyes lowered while inside, her emotions churned with intense attachment forming. The father-child bond deepened in quiet moments, Mia sharing drawings that included a tall figure she called the kind man, or clutching her baseball glove while listening to stories Vinny arranged through discreet channels. Yet drama escalated. Harlan, sensing weakness, orchestrated another unreasonable confrontation, this time near Elena's neighborhood where his men lingered threateningly, creating fear for families like hers. Vinny intervened swiftly in a bold street encounter, his powerful frame steady as he faced the rivals with measured words that de-escalated without force. The suspense hung heavy, but his actions shielded Elena and Mia once more. His remorse grew violently intense in the aftermath, gnawing guilt over the world he had helped shape, now fueled a deeper commitment to healing. In the quiet stillness of another late night, Vinny sat alone in his luxurious brownstone, surrounded by symbols of success, framed photos of Chicago Cubs, Game's heavy oak furniture, and the soft glow of city lights through tall windows. His heart tore with consuming conflict. The overwhelming paternal love for Mia burned brighter, while responsibility toward Elena, the resilient mother enduring such pitiful hardship, stirred profound emotional upheaval. He had wealth to command fleets and influence city projects, yet it paled against the need to restore what his past choices had broken. Elena, in her humble apartment, held Mia close during another cold night, the new blankets a small mercy. Her inner world was a whirlwind of shock, confusion, and emerging trust, numbing at times, fiercely hopeful at others. The unfairness of her life still brought tears, but Vinny's quiet protection planted seeds of attachment that felt passionate in their intensity. The father-child relationship, still unspoken in full, grew stronger through these acts of compassion, healing old wounds one guarded step at a time. The conflict with Harlan loomed larger, setting the stage for greater tests ahead. For Vinny, the remorse and love intertwined into an unbreakable drive. For Elena, suspicion slowly yielded to a deep burning trust born from desperation turned to guarded hope. Their shared path, marked by unfair hardships and unexpected kindness, pulled at the heart with every quiet moment and every tense confrontation. Next morning, the weak Chicago sunlight struggled to pierce the grimy windows of Elena Thompson's South Side apartment, illuminating the same stark reality that greeted her every day. The single room felt smaller than ever, its walls stained with years of neglect and dampness from leaking pipes. A thin blanket lay draped over the sagging mattress where Elena and her daughter Mia had huddled through another restless night. The wind outside rattled the loose panes, carrying the sharp bite of early autumn cold that seeped into bones already weary from endless hardship. Elena lay awake long before dawn, her thin, malnourished frame aching from the double shift the day before. Her cheeks were hollow, her arms too slender, marked by the constant fatigue of sleep deprivation and the quiet humiliation of choosing which bill to ignore so her child could have medicine. Mia's breathing had been labored again in the night, the asthma flaring under the moldy conditions and poor heating. Elena had stayed up for hours, gently rubbing the little girl's back and whispering soft, timid words of comfort. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mama's here." Her voice remained polite and gentle even in exhaustion shaped by years of survival, where raising one's voice could mean losing a job or inviting trouble. The poverty was deeply pitiful and absurdly unfair. Enduring freezing nights, wrapped in threadbare coats, skipping meals so Mia could eat, and facing the landlord's unreasonable demands with nothing but apologies. Elena felt desperate and powerless, her inner world a storm of violent emotional tearing. Fierce maternal love clashing with crushing shame that left her numb and disoriented at times. A wave of dizziness washing over her when the weight of it all became too much. Later that morning, after walking Mia to school with the child, clutching her cherished old baseball glove, a faded keepsake from her grandfather's Little League days, Elena returned to Russo's prime steakhouse. The journey highlighted the stark gap between worlds. Her worn shoes slapped against cracked sidewalks while luxury cars glided past on cleaner streets. Inside the steakhouse, the luxurious setting gleamed with increasing intensity, crystal chandeliers casting golden light over heavy mahogany tables, the rich scent of prime rib and aged whiskey filling the air, and the quiet hum of power from men who shaped the city. For Elena, it was still a place of invisibility, her black apron a shield, as she moved with practiced quietness voice, soft and polite when serving. "More coffee, sir," she would murmur, eyes lowered, even as hunger gnawed at her own stomach. Vinny Russo arrived with his usual commanding presence, his fair-skinned features set in calm authority as he oversaw preparations in the private dining room. His wealth displayed itself subtly yet powerfully tailored suits, seamless control over his vast trucking and construction empire that generated millions and influenced Midwest roots. yet his heart carried deeper layers of torment. The gnawing remorse from discovering Mia as his biological daughter had only grown more intense, violently tearing at him in quiet moments. He had built success through bold decisions, but the image of Elena's exhausted face and Mia's fragile health filled him with consuming guilt. An overwhelming paternal love burned passionately from the first moment of recognition, pure, protective, and fierce, creating a compelling focal point amid his inner conflict. How could a man of his power have allowed his own child to endure such extreme misery? The remorse left him numb at times, his blue eyes clouding with violent emotional upheaval, as he wrestled between the ruthless world he knew and the responsibility awakening inside him. The escalating humiliations began when Harlan and his associates returned for another tense meeting, their presence thickening the air with unreasonable aggression. Harlan, the calculating antagonist driven by pure greed, leaned back in his chair with a sneer, dismissing Vinny's measured proposals for territory boundaries. "You think you can keep everything while the rest of us scrape by," he said loudly, his words laced with veiled threats that made the room feel smaller. His men nodded in agreement, creating bold posturing that heightened suspense without crossing into open violence. Vinny sat at the head, his posture steady, but inside the conflict raged more fiercely. Each unreasonable demand stirred old instincts, yet the thought of Mia and Elena, his daughter, and the resilient mother forced him to hold back. His remorse deepened into a violent inner tearing. The powerful man who commanded loyalty now felt the sharp sting of past choices that had left vulnerable lives in the cold. Elena worked the room silently, her movements careful as she cleared plates and refilled glasses. Harlan's group grew louder, their conversation turning dismissive toward the staff. One of them snapped his fingers at Elena with degrading impatience. "Hey girl, more water and make it quick." The humiliation burned deeply pitiful in its absurdity. Elena's cheeks flushed with shame, her thin frame trembling slightly as she complied, voice soft and timid. "Right away, sir." She felt powerless and desperate, the stark contrast to Vinny's world of luxury, making her situation even more humiliating. Sleep-deprived and malnourished, she endured the cold stares while her mind spun with guarded fear and anxious curiosity. Why did this powerful man Vinny continue to offer quiet help while others treated her like nothing? As the meeting intensified, Harlan escalated the drama with unjust barbs aimed at Vinny's leadership, questioning his ability to protect his own interests. The tension built like a gathering storm, suspense hanging heavy as Vinny's men shifted uncomfortably. Vinny felt the inner turmoil surge to new heights, gnawing remorse, mixing with a burning protective instinct that left him in extreme psychological shock. His wealth, displayed in the effortless command of the room and the empire beyond, felt hollow against the reality of his daughter's suffering. In a brief lull, he excused himself and arranged another discreet delivery, warm blankets and nutritious food sent to Elena's apartment. The act brought a fleeting moment of condensed emotional stillness, yet it only amplified his violent inner conflict. He loved them with an intensity that consumed him, yet the guilt of years lost tore at his heart like never before. Later that afternoon, after the meeting broke, with no clear resolution, trouble spilled onto the streets in an unexpected confrontation. Harlan's men lingered near one of Vinny's warehouses on the south side, blocking a truck and making bold demands for consideration in a tense standoff. Vinny arrived swiftly but calmly, stepping out of his sedan with measured authority. The rivals postured aggressively, voices raised in unreasonable accusations, creating a charged atmosphere of suspense. Vinny faced them directly, his presence alone de-escalating the moment through firm, controlled words. "This isn't how we do business," he stated, his tone leaving no room for escalation. The rivals eventually backed down, but the encounter left a lingering threat that heightened the drama. That evening, Elena returned home to find the new supplies waiting, soft blankets that finally blocked the wind and food that brought color back to Mia's cheeks. Shock and confusion flooded her system. She sat on the edge of the mattress holding a simple apple pie someone had included its homemade scent, evoking distant family memories. Tears welled as the absurdity of her misery crashed down once more, enduring so many cold, wind-filled nights while others lived in warmth and abundance. Her body felt numb, a wave of dizziness and pain washing over her from the emotional overload. At once desperate and guarded, she whispered softly to Mia, "Someone is watching over us, sweetheart." Fear still lingered, but a passionate surge of trust and attachment began to burn brighter, from initial suspicion to an overwhelming sense of being protected by a powerful man who saw their suffering. The mindset of someone once so poor, now receiving such care, left her in deep disorientation, her inner world violently torn between hope and lingering anxiety. Weeks later, the protections continued quietly while Harlan's aggression mounted. Another unreasonable situation struck when the landlord evicted a neighboring family without warning, leaving Elena terrified that her own turn was coming. The injustice exposed her utter misery in heartbreaking detail, thin and sleep-deprived. She comforted Mia through another anxious night, her voice timid and polite even as tears threatened. Vinny learned of the threat and intervened from afar, ensuring stability without fanfare. His remorse grew, consuming the father-child bond, deepening in quiet moments. Mia's innocent drawings now, including a strong figure, she called the Protector, or sharing stories of Chicago Cubs games that Vinny arranged through subtle channels. In one particularly tense street confrontation near Elena's neighborhood, Harlan's men appeared again, their bold presence, creating fear for local families. Vinny stepped in, decisively facing the rivals in a charged but controlled encounter that diffused the danger through authority and calm negotiation. The suspense was palpable, yet his actions shielded those he now felt responsible for. His heart tore with increasing intensity, violent conflict between his empire's demands and the compassionate pull toward Elena and Mia. Elena, in the stillness of another late night, held her daughter close under the new blankets. The disparity felt numbing her pitiful poverty against Vinny's displayed wealth and power. Yet the overwhelming attachment grew passionate and intense as trust replaced suspicion. The drama escalated in her inner world, confusing, tearing, yet filled with a burning hope that a powerful man's protection might finally ease their suffering. For Vinny, the shocking truth of fatherhood remained a hidden storm, his love for the child an emotional upheaval toward the resilient mother, creating profound, moving depth. The humiliations and conflicts built toward an inevitable turning point, where kindness from the unexpected would begin to heal old wounds and challenge the cruelty of a rival's greed. Soft gray light filtered into Elena Thompson's cramped Southside apartment, revealing the same heartbreaking scene of quiet desperation. The thin walls did little to block the persistent Chicago wind that whistled through every crack, carrying the chill deep into the bones. Elena sat on the edge of the worn mattress, her malnourished frame hunched forward, as she watched Mia sleep fitfully. The little girl's chest rose and fell with effort, the asthma still lingering despite the new inhaler. Elena herself looked painfully thin, her face drawn from endless sleep deprivation, and the constant worry that gnawed at her like the cold itself. Poverty had stripped her life to its most humiliating core, enduring, night after night, wrapped in insufficient blankets, choosing between heat and food, and facing the landlord's latest unreasonable notice taped to the door, another threat of eviction if the back rent was not paid immediately. It was absurdly unfair. This relentless cycle that left a good mother so powerless and desperate. Elena's voice remained soft and timid when she gently woke Mia for school. "Time to get up, sweetheart. Mama will walk you." Her words carried the polite gentleness of someone who had learned survival, meant keeping her head down. Inside, however, her emotions churned with violent intensity. Fierce love for her daughter clashing against crushing shame and anxiety. She felt numb at moments, a wave of dizziness washing over her as the weight of their situation threatened to pull her under. Later that morning, after leaving Mia at school with a quiet hug and the old baseball glove tucked safely in the child's backpack, Elena made her way to Russo's prime steakhouse. The journey through the city only sharpened the disparity. Her worn shoes moved past gleaming storefronts and luxury vehicles, while her own coat, thin and patched, offered little protection from the wind. Inside the steakhouse, the luxurious setting unfolded with increasing intensity, crystal chandeliers bathing the mahogany tables in warm golden light, the rich aroma of prime rib and fresh coffee, wrapping around the room like an embrace of comfort and power. For Elena, it remained a place of quiet service, her black apron, a symbol of invisibility as she moved between tables with practiced grace. Vincent Russo occupied the head of the private dining room once more, his powerful presence commanding the space without effort. His fair-skinned face showed calm authority, but his wealth and success were on full display in the seamless way. His empire operated vast trucking routes and major construction projects that generated millions and shaped entire neighborhoods. Yet beneath that exterior, his inner world was a storm of deepening torment. The gnawing remorse over unknowingly abandoning his biological daughter Mia years earlier had become a violent tearing in his heart. Every glimpse of Elena's exhausted eyes and Mia's fragile health amplified the consuming guilt. His paternal love burned with passionate intensity from the very first moment of recognition, pure, protective, and fiercely responsible. This emotional upheaval toward Elena, the resilient mother enduring such extreme hardship, created a compelling focal point. He felt an overwhelming urge to shield them both. Yet the conflict raged. The powerful man who had built an empire through tough choices now wrestled with profound remorse that left him in moments of numb shock. The turning point arrived during the continued high-stakes negotiations with Harlan. The rival faction leader entered with his usual aggressive posture, his associates flanking him as unreasonable demands filled the air. Harlan leaned forward, his voice loud and dismissive. Your roots are bleeding money because you're too soft, Russo. Time to share or step aside. The words carried veiled threats that heightened the tension, turning the meeting into a battlefield of bold posturing and suspense. Vinny listened with steady eyes, but inside the drama escalated his remorse, mixing with a burning protective instinct that tore at him violently. He could not risk escalation that might endanger Elena or Mia, yet every unjust word from Harlan stirred old instincts he fought hard to suppress. Elena worked the room with quiet efficiency, her thin frame moving carefully as she cleared plates and poured water. Harlan's group grew bolder, one of them snapping at her with degrading impatience. You there, more bread, and don't take all day about it. The humiliation landed like a physical blow. Elena's cheeks burned with shame, her voice coming out soft and timid as she replied, Right away, sir. She felt desperately powerless, the stark contrast between the luxurious room and her own pitiful reality leaving her in deep disorientation. Sleep-deprived and malnourished, she endured the cold stares while anxiety and fear swirled inside her. At the same time, a guarded curiosity flickered whenever her eyes briefly met Vinny's. Why did this powerful man continue to offer silent help? The mindset of someone who had known only hardship, now suddenly sensing protection, left her emotionally numb, a wave of dizziness and inner pain washing over her. As the negotiation reached a breaking point, Harlan escalated with an absurdly unfair accusation claiming Vinny's hesitation proved weakness and threatening to disrupt operations in ways that would hurt innocent workers. The room grew thick with suspense. Vinny felt the inner tearing reach new heights, violent conflict between his empire's demands and the overwhelming paternal love that now guided him. In a moment of condensed emotional stillness, he rose calmly and addressed the table with measured authority. This meeting is over for today. We will find a better way. His words carried quiet power, diffusing the immediate tension without force. Later that afternoon, the conflict spilled into the streets in another unexpected confrontation. Harlan's men appeared near one of Vinny's Southside warehouses, blocking trucks and making bold demands in a tense standoff. Vinny arrived swiftly, stepping out with calm resolve. The rivals postured aggressively, voices raised in unreasonable challenges, creating a charged atmosphere of suspense. Vinny faced them directly, his presence alone, shifting the dynamic as he stated firmly, This stops now. We talk like men who respect the work. The encounter de-escalated through his authority, but the threat lingered, heightening the drama and Vinny's inner remorse. Each confrontation reminded him how his past choices had contributed to a world where families like Elena and Mia suffered. That evening, Elena returned home to find another quiet act of protection, a warm meal, new blankets, and medicine for Mia already waiting. Shock flooded her system. She sank onto the mattress, holding the items with trembling hands as tears slipped down her cheeks. The absurdity of her misery felt violently tearing, enduring so many cold, wind-filled nights while this powerful man offered safety from the shadows. Her body felt numb with disorientation, a wave of dizziness and emotional pain making her lose balance for a moment. At once fearful and curious, she whispered softly to the sleeping, Mia, why is he helping us, sweetheart? From deep suspicion, an overwhelming surge of trust and attachment began to burn, more intensely passionate and pure, focused on the Falcon, protection and responsibility he showed. The mindset of someone once desperately poor, now receiving such care, left her heart in extreme psychological shock, violently torn between lingering anxiety and a growing burning hope. Weeks later, the deeper emotional layers continued to unfold. Another unreasonable situation struck when the school called Elena about Mia's worsening asthma, citing the poor living conditions as a concern. The injustice exposed her utter misery in heartbreaking detail, thin, sleep-deprived, and powerless. She stood in the school office with head-bowed voice, timid and polite as she promised to do better. Tears threatened as she walked home, the cold wind cutting through her thin coat while richer families passed in warm cars. Vinny, learning of the call through discreet channels, arranged immediate medical support and temporary warmer housing assistance, all handled quietly to avoid drawing attention. In a quiet moment of condensed emotional stillness later that night, Vinny sat alone in his luxurious brownstone, surrounded by symbols of his success, framed Chicago Cubs memorabilia, heavy oak furniture, and the soft glow of city lights. His heart tore with increasing intensity. The paternal love for Mia burned fiercer, while his emotional upheaval toward Elena, the kind, resilient woman enduring such humiliating poverty, stirred profound remorse and responsibility. He felt the violent conflict between his powerful world and the compassion awakening inside him, the guilt consuming him as he realized how much time had been lost. Elena, holding Mia close under the new blankets, experienced her own deepening turmoil. The disparity felt numbing her pitiful, humiliating poverty against Vinny's displayed wealth and quiet protection. Yet the attachment grew stronger, passionate, and intense as trust replaced fear. Her inner world was a whirlwind, confusing, tearing at times, yet filled with a surging hope that a powerful man's compassion might finally bring healing to their lives. The turning point had shifted something fundamental. Harlan's aggression continued to build, setting the stage for greater tests, but in the quiet spaces between conflicts, the father-child bond and the protective connection between Vinny and Elena began to mend old wounds. Kindness from the most unexpected source was slowly revealing its power, pulling at hearts with every act of quiet rescue and every moment of inner emotional depth. Next morning, faint sunlight struggled through the newly insulated windows of the temporary, safer apartment Vinny had quietly arranged for Elena Thompson and her daughter. The space was modest, but worlds apart from the freezing South Side tenement they had left behind. Still, Elena woke with the same heavy ache in her chest, her thin, malnourished body curled protectively around Mia. The little girl's breathing had improved slightly with consistent medicine, yet the shadow of past cold nights lingered in both their exhausted faces. Elena remained desperately impoverished in spirit, haunted by years of humiliating scarcity, skipping meals, enduring wind-filled nights, with nothing but threadbare blankets, and facing one unreasonable demand after another from a system that seemed determined to break her. Her sleep deprivation showed in the dark circles under her eyes, and the constant anxiety left her feeling powerless even in this small improvement. Elena's voice stayed soft and timid as she helped Mia get ready for school. "Put on the warm coat, sweetheart. It will keep the wind away." Her polite gentleness masked the violent inner turmoil that tore at her heart with increasing intensity. She felt a confusing mix of gratitude and lingering fear, her mind numb at times with deep disorientation. How could such sudden protection be real for someone who had known only hardship? Later that morning, Elena returned to Russo's Prime Steakhouse for her shift. The luxurious setting now felt even more pronounced in its contrast. Crystal chandeliers cast their golden glow over polished mahogany tables dressed with heavy white linens. The rich aroma of searing prime rib and fine coffee filled the air, while the quiet hum of power from influential patrons underscored the wealth that surrounded her. For Elena, the disparity remained stark and humiliating, her own thin frame moving invisibly among tables where men conducted business worth millions, while she still carried the emotional weight of years spent choosing between rent and medicine. Vinny Russo sat once again at the head of the private dining room, his commanding presence filling the space with effortless authority. His fair-skinned features reflected calm control, yet his vast wealth displayed itself more intensely through the seamless operation of his trucking empire and major construction projects that shaped the city. Millions flowed through his legitimate businesses, giving him influence that reached far beyond the steakhouse walls. However, his inner world churned with ever-deepening torment. The gnawing remorse over the years he had unknowingly left his biological daughter Mia and her mother Elena in such extreme poverty had become a violent, consuming force. His paternal love burned with passionate intensity, a pure and protective attachment that had ignited from the very first shocking moment of recognition. This emotional upheaval toward Elena, the resilient, kind woman who symbolized quiet strength amid suffering, created a compelling focal point in his heart. He felt an overwhelming responsibility to heal the wounds his absence had caused. Yet the conflict raged violently inside him. The powerful man torn between the ruthless world he had built and the compassion that now demanded he navigate a gentler path. The deepening involvement began as Harlan returned with his associates for another round of tense negotiations over territory and routes. The rival leader's aggression had escalated his unreasonable demands, growing bolder as he pushed for control that would squeeze smaller operators and honest workers. Harlan leaned forward, his voice carrying veiled threats. "Your hesitation is costing everyone, Russo. Time to decide who really runs these streets." The atmosphere thickened with suspense, turning the meeting into a careful dance of power and restraint. Vinny listened with steady blue eyes, but inside the drama intensified his remorse, mixing with a fierce protective instinct that left him in moments of numb shock. Every unjust word from Harlan reminded him of the kind of world that had nearly destroyed Elena and Mia, fueling his inner tearing to new heights. Elena moved through the room with quiet efficiency, serving with her usual soft politeness. "Would you like more water, sir?" she asked one of Harlan's men, her voice timid and appropriate for addressing someone older and more powerful. Harlan's group grew dismissive, one of them making a degrading comment about the help that landed like another layer of humiliation. Elena's cheeks flushed with shame, her thin body trembling slightly as she stepped back. The absurdity of her situation felt violently tearing. She remained impoverished and powerless in the face of such casual cruelty, while Vinny's world gleamed with increasing luxury and influence. Anxiety and fear swirled inside her, mixed with heightened curiosity about the man who continued to offer silent protection. At times she felt guarded, at others a wave of dizziness and emotional numbness washed over her, leaving her disoriented and in pain from the intensity of it all. As the negotiation deepened, Vinny began to involve Elena, subtly asking her in a low voice for practical insights on local routes and community impacts, questions that drew on her years of navigating the South Side as a mother and community worker. Elena hesitated at first, her voice soft and timid. I only know what I see from the buses in the neighborhood, sir." Yet her street-smart understanding of logistics and people proved surprisingly valuable, offering simple, pragmatic observations that cut through the posturing. Vinny listened intently, his respect for her resilience deepening the emotional layers between them. This quiet navigation of cultural differences, his world of power versus her world of survival, began to bridge the gap in small but meaningful ways. Later that afternoon, the conflict spilled into the streets once more, in a bold, unexpected confrontation. Harlan's men blocked a key trucking route on the south side, creating a tense standoff with Vinny's drivers. Vinny arrived calmly but swiftly, stepping into the charged atmosphere with measured authority. The rivals postured aggressively, voices raised in unreasonable accusations, heightening the suspense without crossing into violence. Vinny faced them directly. "We solve this with respect for the work that feeds families," he stated firmly. His presence de-escalated the immediate threat, but the encounter left a lingering shadow of danger that amplified Vinny's inner remorse. Each confrontation tore at him more violently. The powerful man, realizing how his past choices had contributed to the very hardships Elena and Mia had endured for so long. That evening, Elena returned to the safer apartment to find another thoughtful gesture waiting: fresh groceries, warm clothing for Mia, and a simple homemade apple pie reminiscent of childhood family recipes. Shock and confusion flooded her. She sat at the small table, holding the pie with trembling hands as tears slipped silently down her cheeks. The disparity felt numbing, and absurdly unfair years of enduring cold wind and humiliating scarcity now met with such quiet care from a man of immense wealth and power. Her inner world was violently torn from deep suspicion to an overwhelming surge of trust and attachment that burned passionately and intensely. She felt guarded yet curious, fearful yet hopeful. The mindset of someone once desperately poor, now suddenly protected, leaving her in extreme psychological shock. A wave of dizziness and emotional pain washed over her, leaving her numb and disoriented for long moments. In a soft, timid voice, she whispered to the sleeping Mia, "He keeps helping us. I don't know why, but it feels like safety." Weeks later, the deepening involvement continued through more quiet acts and street-level tensions. Another unreasonable situation struck when a creditor from Elena's past appeared at the apartment building, making loud and unjust demands for old debts in front of neighbors. The humiliation was deeply pitiful. Elena, standing thin and sleep-deprived voice, polite and trembling as she tried to calm the man while protecting Mia from the scene. Vinny learned of the incident through discreet channels and resolved it swiftly, shielding them once more without fanfare. In condensed moments of emotional stillness, Vinny sat alone in his luxurious brownstone, surrounded by symbols of American success, framed Chicago Cubs photos, heavy oak furniture, and the warm glow of city lights through tall windows. His heart tore with increasing intensity. The paternal love for his daughter Mia burned fiercer with every small step forward, while his emotional upheaval toward Elena, the kind woman who symbolized compassion, in contrast to Harlan's greed, stirred profound remorse and a fierce sense of responsibility. The violent inner conflict between his powerful empire and the healing compassion awakening inside him grew more consuming, leaving him in deep, moving turmoil. Elena, holding Mia close during another calmer night, experienced her own escalating emotional rhythm. The poverty that had once defined her felt slightly eased, yet the memory of its humiliating extremity remained vivid. Her trust in Vinny had deepened into a passionate, burning attachment, pure and focused on protection and fatherly care for her child. The drama of her inner world escalated, confusing, numbing, and violently tearing at times, yet filled with a surging hope that this powerful man's kindness might truly bring long-term healing. The involvement between them deepened further with each navigated challenge and each street confrontation diffused. Harlan's aggression continued to loom, but in the spaces between the father-child bond grew stronger through Mia's innocent smiles and drawings, and the quiet connection with Elena offered Vinny a path toward redeeming his past. Kindness and responsibility were slowly navigating the vast cultural divide between extreme poverty and immense power, pulling hearts closer with every tense moment and every quiet act of compassion. Gentle light filtered into the modest but secure apartment. Vinny had arranged casting a softer glow than the harsh mornings Elena Thompson once faced in her old South Side tenement. The space offered basic warmth and safety, yet Elena still woke with a heavy heart, her thin, malnourished frame tense from years of ingrained survival mode. Mia slept more peacefully now with reliable medicine, but the memory of endless cold nights and labored breathing lingered like a shadow. Elena remained deeply marked by the extremity of her former poverty sleep-deprived nights, wrapped in insufficient layers against the biting Chicago wind, humiliating choices between food and rent, and the constant fear of eviction or medical crisis that left her feeling utterly powerless and desperate. Elena's voice stayed soft and timid as she prepared a simple breakfast for Mia. "Eat slowly, sweetheart. We have enough today." Her polite gentleness hid the escalating inner turmoil that tore at her with growing violence. Gratitude for the protection mixed with lingering guarded fear and confusion, leaving her emotions numb and disoriented at times. A wave of dizziness would occasionally wash over her when she considered how drastically her life was changing under the quiet care of a powerful man. Later that morning, Elena arrived at Russo's Prime Steakhouse for her shift. The luxurious setting now almost overwhelming in its contrast. Crystal chandeliers bathed the mahogany tables in warm golden light, while the rich scents of prime rib and aged whiskey spoke of comfort and influence, far removed from her past reality. Patrons conducted business worth millions in hushed tones, their world gleaming with increasing intensity. Elena moved invisibly among them in her black apron, while her own thin body, a living reminder of the vast disparity between wealth and poverty. Vincent "Vinny" Russo occupied his usual place at the head of the private dining room, his fair-skinned features set in calm authority as he managed the ongoing negotiations. His wealth and power displayed themselves more intensely than ever through the vast network of trucking routes and construction projects that generated millions and shaped neighborhoods across the Midwest. Yet his inner world had become a battlefield of profound torment. The gnawing remorse over the years his biological daughter Mia and her mother Elena had endured extreme hardship now tore at him with violent intensity. His paternal love burned with passionate, protective force from the moment he first recognized the truth, creating a compelling emotional focal point. This deep upheaval toward Elena, the kind, resilient woman who symbolized quiet compassion against Harlan's greed, stirred overwhelming responsibility and fierce attachment. Vinny felt the consuming conflict between his powerful empire and the healing compassion awakening inside him, leaving him in moments of extreme psychological shock and numb reflection. The climax of the power shift unfolded, as Harlan returned with heightened aggression for what was meant to be a decisive meeting. The rival leader's unreasonable demands escalated, his voice loud, with bold accusations that Vinny's hesitation was weakening everyone. "You're losing control, Russo. The streets don't wait for soft hearts." Harlan's associates postured threateningly, turning the room into a tense arena of suspense and posturing. The drama intensified as Harlan pushed for concessions that would harm smaller operators and families like those on the South Side. Vinny sat steady, but inside the violent inner tearing reached new peaks, remorse, and paternal love clashing against the old instincts of his world, leaving his heart in consuming turmoil. Elena served the table with quiet efficiency, her movements careful. Harlan's group grew dismissive again, one man making a degrading remark about service staff that landed as another layer of humiliation. Elena's cheeks burned with shame, her voice emerging soft and timid. "More coffee, sir." She felt desperately powerless in that moment, the stark gap between the luxurious room and her lingering memories of poverty, leaving her in deep disorientation and anxiety. Yet a spark of heightened curiosity and trust flickered whenever she glanced toward Vinny, the man whose protection had begun to ease their suffering. As tensions peaked, Vinny rose with measured authority, addressing the room directly. His calm presence shifted the dynamic, demanding respect and de-escalating the immediate confrontation without force. Harlan's faction backed down for the moment, but the power balance had visibly tilted. Associates at the table began looking to Vinny's steady leadership with new regard, while Harlan's influence waned. In this climax, the investors and associates in the room, men tied to legitimate business interests, started siding more openly with Vinny's approach of restraint and fairness, recognizing the long-term value over short-sighted aggression. Later that afternoon, the conflict spilled into the streets in a bold, unexpected confrontation near a key South Side warehouse. Harlan's men appeared suddenly blocking trucks and making loud, unreasonable demands in a charged standoff. Vinny arrived swiftly but calmly, stepping into the tense atmosphere with firm resolve. The rivals postured aggressively, voices raised in threats that heightened suspense, yet Vinny faced them with quiet authority. "We protect the work that feeds families. not tear it down. His words and presence diffused the immediate danger, turning the moment into a clear demonstration of strength through restraint. The rivals eventually withdrew, but the encounter left a lingering threat that amplified the drama. In the aftermath, a life-threatening moment tested everything. During the street tension, one of Harlan's men made a sudden aggressive move that caused a truck to swerve dangerously close to where Elena had stepped out briefly on a break nearby, drawn by worry after hearing rumors. Mia, who had come looking for her mother after school with her worn baseball glove in hand, witnessed the chaos from a safe distance. The little girl, along with her loyal best friend Tommy, a vulnerable 9-year-old from a similarly broken family, who had been staying close, rushed forward in innocent bravery. Tommy, initially distrustful of the powerful fancy man, had warned Mia earlier. Powerful men only hurt people like us. Don't trust him. Yet, in this crisis, both children acted with pure kindness. Mia and Tommy used a simple scout first aid kit from Tommy's backpack and ice wrapped in an old Cubs t-shirt to tend to a minor injury Vinny sustained while shielding others. Their gentle, innocent care, small hands bandaging with careful attention began the healing process, both physically for Vinny's reopened old scar and emotionally for his wounded heart. Vinny knelt to their level, his powerful frame humbled as tears of remorse and love stung his eyes. The father-child bond surged in that condensed moment of emotional stillness, Mia's trusting gaze melting years of guilt. Tommy watched his initial distrust cracking as he witnessed true kindness, creating an emotional turning point that revealed deeper truths about the struggles of disadvantaged children. Elena arrived moments later, horror and anxiety flooding her as she saw the scene. She felt shock and confusion, a wave of dizziness and numbness nearly causing her to lose balance. Her voice came out timid and polite amid the fear. "Are you hurt, sir?" Yet the sight of her daughter and Tommy helping the man who had protected them stirred an overwhelming surge of trust and attachment, passionate and intense. The mindset of someone once desperately poor, now seeing her child safe and cared for by such power, left her heart violently torn. Tears, flowing as sympathy for their shared journey, evoked deep emotion. Weeks later, the healing continued in quiet moments. Vinny ensured further medical support and stability, his remorse deepening into a fierce commitment. Harlan's aggression mounted, but the power shift had begun, associates favoring Vinny's measured approach over cruelty. In the stillness of another night, Vinny sat in his luxurious brownstone, surrounded by American symbols of success like framed Cubs memorabilia. His inner conflict raged more intensely than ever, the paternal love for Mia and protective upheaval toward Elena consuming him with moving depth. Elena held her daughter and Tommy close the children's kindness, healing not just physical wounds but emotional ones. Her poverty's humiliating memory remained vivid, yet trust had deepened into burning attachment. The drama escalated, inwardly confusing, numbing and tearing, while hope grew stronger through compassion and the father-child bond that was slowly mending old scars. The climax had shifted the balance. Kindness from the vulnerable was beginning to heal the powerful, setting the stage for greater redemption amid ongoing threats from Harlan's greed. The emotional layers deepened with every tense confrontation, and every quiet act of healing pulling hearts toward compassion and responsibility. Next morning, pale Chicago light filtered softly through the curtains of the modest but secure apartment, bringing a fragile sense of calm that Elena Thompson had rarely known. The space offered basic comforts, warm blankets, a reliable heater, and enough food in the small kitchenette to quiet the constant hunger that had once defined her days. Yet Elena woke with her thin, malnourished body still carrying the deep imprint of years of extreme poverty. She remained sleep-deprived from years of anxious nights. Her frame painfully slender from too many meals, stretched thin or skipped entirely to feed Mia. The memory of freezing wind cutting through cracked windows and the humiliating choice between medicine and rent lingered like a wound that refused to close fully. Even now she felt desperate and powerless, at moments haunted by the absurdity of how long she had endured such misery while others lived in abundance. Elena's voice stayed soft and timid as she prepared breakfast for Mia and her loyal best friend Tommy, who had been staying with them more often for safety. "Eat as much as you want today, children. There is plenty." Her polite gentleness masked the violent inner turmoil that tore at her heart with increasing intensity. Gratitude for the protection mixed with lingering fear and guarded curiosity, leaving her emotions numb and disoriented. A wave of dizziness would sometimes wash over her when she reflected on how drastically her life and her children's had shifted under the quiet care of a powerful man. Later that morning, Elena arrived at Russo's Prime Steakhouse, the luxurious setting now stark in its contrast to her past reality. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over mahogany tables dressed in crisp white linens, while the rich aromas of prime rib and fine coffee filled the air with an aura of comfort and influence. The wealth on display grew more intense, with every shift patrons discussing deals worth millions. Their world of power far removed from the cold, wind-filled nights Elena had once endured. She moved quietly in her black apron, serving with practiced politeness her own thin frame. A living reminder of the vast gap between poverty and prosperity, Vincent Russo sat at the head of the private dining room, his commanding presence filling the space with steady authority. His fair-skinned features reflected calm control, yet his vast wealth and power displayed themselves with greater intensity through the seamless operation of his trucking and construction empire that generated millions and shaped the Prosenegrestura city. However, his inner world churned with ever-deepening torment. The gnawing remorse over the years his biological daughter Mia had suffered in poverty now tore at him, violently amplified by the healing moments with the children. His paternal love burned with passionate, protective intensity from the first moment of recognition, creating a compelling focal point. His emotional upheaval toward Elena, the resilient, kind woman who had endured such humiliating hardship while raising his child, stirred overwhelming responsibility and fierce attachment. The conflict raged inside him, the powerful man torn between his empire's demands and the compassion that now demanded he offer more than silent protection. The negotiation of terms unfolded as the ongoing meetings with Harlan reached a critical stage. Harlan returned with escalated aggression, his unreasonable demands growing louder as he pushed for control that would further squeeze vulnerable families and workers. "You can't keep hiding behind soft words, Russo. The roots belong to those strong enough to take them." The atmosphere thickened with suspense, Harlan's associates posturing boldly to pressure Vinny into concessions. Vinny listened with steady eyes, but inside the drama escalated violently, his remorse and paternal love clashing against the old instincts of power, leaving his heart in consuming turmoil. Elena served the table with quiet efficiency, her voice soft and timid when addressed. "Would you like more water, sir?" Harlan's group grew dismissive again, one man making a degrading comment that landed as fresh humiliation. Elena felt desperately powerless in that moment, the stark disparity leaving her in deep disorientation and anxiety. Yet her trust in Vinny had deepened into a burning attachment, passionate and intense, focused on the protection he provided for her children. As tensions peaked, Vinny rose with measured authority and addressed the room. His calm presence shifted the dynamic further, with associates beginning to side more openly with his approach of fairness and long-term stability over Harlan's greed. In the quiet aftermath, Vinny turned to Elena privately in a moment of condensed emotional stillness. He spoke with genuine respect. "Your insights on the neighborhoods and families have been invaluable. You understand what these decisions truly cost. I want to offer more than temporary help." Elena froze, shock and confusion flooding her. Her hands trembled as she set down a tray, a wave of dizziness and numbness nearly causing her to lose balance. Her voice came out soft, timid, and polite. "Sir, I don't understand. I'm only a waitress. I've been so poor for so long, thin, cold, hungry most nights. Why would someone like you offer anything more to someone like me?" The mindset of someone once desperately impoverished, now suddenly facing protection and respect from a wealthy, powerful man left her in extreme psychological shock. Her inner world tore violently, fear mixing with heightened curiosity and an overwhelming surge of trust that burned passionately from deep within. Vinny's heart tore with even greater intensity. The gnawing remorse surged as he saw the depth of her past suffering reflected in her eyes. His paternal love for Mia and protective upheaval toward Elena consumed him. "You and the children deserve stability. I want to provide a fair position overseeing community logistics programs tied to my legitimate businesses. It would mean steady work with proper pay enough to clear any remaining burdens and secure a better future for Mia and Tommy. In return, your practical knowledge would help guide fairer decisions." The negotiation deepened as Elena, still guarded yet increasingly attached, listened with wide eyes. Another unreasonable situation struck later that afternoon, when a persistent creditor from her past appeared outside the steakhouse making loud and unjust demands in public, exposing her lingering misery in humiliating detail. The scene was absurdly unfair. Elena standing thin and sleep-deprived, voice trembling politely as she tried to calm the man while protecting the children from embarrassment. Vinny intervened calmly from nearby, resolving the matter with quiet authority and shielding them once more. The incident tore at Elena's emotions, violently, tears of shame and relief, mixing as the disparity between her past poverty and Vinny's increasing displays of wealth and protection became overwhelming. Weeks later, the personal demands took clearer shape in quiet conversations. Vinny offered not only fair compensation to cover past medical debts and housing stability, but also opportunities for the children, better schooling, medical care, and programs that addressed the struggles of disadvantaged kids like Tommy. whose initial distrust had begun turning into cautious trust. After witnessing Vinny's kindness during the street incident, Tommy had shared quietly with Mia, maybe he really isn't like the others. He helped when it mattered. Elena sat with Vinny in a private corner of the steakhouse during a slow moment, her heart pounding with intense inner conflict. She felt desperate yet hopeful, fearful yet curious, her voice soft and timid. I've endured so many cold nights with nothing. Seen my child struggle for breath while I could do nothing. If this is real, I ask for enough to truly heal our wounds, not just money, but a chance to contribute without fear. For Mia and Tommy, they deserve to feel safe. Her words carried the weight of years of torment, evoking deep sympathy as the violent intensity of her emotions surfaced. Vinny's remorse deepened into a fierce commitment, his inner tearing reaching new heights. The powerful man who commanded millions now humbled himself before the mother of his child, offering terms that reflected genuine responsibility. His wealth, displayed in the effortless way he could change lives, felt meaningful only when used to heal. In that condensed emotional stillness, the father-child bond and the protective connection with Elena grew stronger, the children's innocent kindness continuing to mend old emotional wounds. Later that night, Elena held Mia and Tommy close in the apartment, the new sense of stability bringing tears of overwhelming attachment. The drama of her inner world escalated, confusing, numbing, and tearing at times, yet filled with burning hope. From deep suspicion, passionate trust had taken root, focused on compassion, protection, and the fatherly care Vinny showed her children. The negotiation marked a profound turning point. Harlan's threats continued in the background, with another tense street confrontation looming. But the terms offered by Vinny represented a path toward redemption and healing. Kindness and responsibility were slowly transforming lives, pulling at hearts with every quiet demand, every act of protection, and every moment of deep emotional connection between the powerful man and the vulnerable family he had come to cherish. Next morning, soft light streamed into the modest apartment that had become a fragile sanctuary for Elena Thompson and the children. The space felt warmer, the air no longer carrying the sharp bite of freezing wind that had once pierced through cracked walls and thin blankets. Yet Elena woke with her thin, malnourished body, still bearing the scars of years of extreme poverty. Sleep deprivation etched into her face, her frame painfully slender from too many nights choosing between heat and food, and the humiliating memory of endless creditors' knocks and empty cupboards. Even with the new stability, the disparity between her past desperation and Vinny's world of wealth remained vivid, leaving her at times powerless and anxious, her inner world a quiet storm of lingering shame. Elena's voice remained soft and timid as she helped Mia and Tommy prepare for the day. Stay close and be safe, children. Mama will see you after school. Her polite gentleness concealed the escalating inner tearing that grew more violent with each passing day. Deep trust in Vinny now burned passionately, mixed with guarded hope and moments of numb disorientation. A wave of dizziness would occasionally overtake her when she considered how completely her life had shifted from humiliating scarcity to unexpected protection. Later that morning, Elena arrived at Russo's Prime Steakhouse, where the luxurious setting gleamed with increasing intensity. Crystal chandeliers cast golden warmth over mahogany tables, the rich aromas of prime rib and fine coffee, underscoring a world of comfort and power far removed from the cold nights she had once endured. Patrons discussed major deals, their influence shaping the city, while Elena moved quietly in her black apron, serving with her usual soft politeness. Vincent "Vinny" Russo presided over the private dining room with steady authority, his fair-skinned features calm, yet his vast wealth and power on full display through the vast trucking and construction empire that generated millions and influenced the Midwest. His legitimate businesses were reaching a critical merger resolution, finalizing agreements that would stabilize routes and protect smaller operators from predatory takeovers. However, his inner world raged with deeper torment than ever. The gnawing remorse over the years Mia and Elena had suffered in poverty tore at him, violently intensified by the children's innocent healing. His paternal love for Mia and protective attachment toward Elena burned with fierce, passionate intensity, creating a compelling emotional focal point. The conflict inside him escalated violent remorse, clashing with the overwhelming responsibility he now embraced, leaving him in moments of extreme psychological shock. The resolution of the merger unfolded as the final negotiations with Harlan reached their peak. Harlan arrived with heightened aggression, his unreasonable demands turning the meeting into a tense battlefield of bold posturing and suspense. Sign on my terms, or watch everything crumble, Russo. The streets reward strength, not weakness. His associates pushed aggressively, threatening to disrupt operations in ways that would harm countless families. Vinny remained steady, his calm authority causing more associates to side openly with his vision of fair, stable routes that protected workers rather than exploiting them. The power shift became undeniable, Harlan's influence waning as Vinny's measured approach won respect. In the quiet moments between discussions, Vinny spoke privately with Elena about the terms they had negotiated. The community programs will provide steady work and security for you and the children. Your voice will help guide decisions that matter to families like yours. Elena listened, her heart pounding. Shock and deep gratitude mixed with lingering fear, her voice emerging soft and timid. I never imagined someone with your power would see value in someone who was once so poor, thin, cold, hungry for so many nights. Thank you. The mindset of someone who had endured such humiliating poverty, now suddenly protected and valued, left her in violent inner turmoil, numb with disbelief, dizzy with overwhelming trust that burned intensely. Later that afternoon, the drama escalated dramatically in a life-threatening ambush on a South Side route. Harlan, sensing his loss of control, orchestrated a bold and unexpected street confrontation. His men blocked several trucks in a tense standoff, voices raised in unreasonable threats that created thick suspense. Vinny arrived swiftly, stepping into the charge scene with firm resolve. This ends today. We protect the work, not destroy it. The rivals postured aggressively, the atmosphere crackling with danger. In the chaos, one of Harlan's men made a sudden, threatening move that caused a vehicle to swerve dangerously close to where Elena had come to deliver urgent paperwork for Vinny. Mia and Tommy, who had been waiting nearby after school, witnessed the terrifying moment. Horror flooded Elena as she rushed forward, anxiety and fear nearly causing her to lose balance. Her thin frame trembled, voice breaking in a soft, timid cry. Mia, Tommy. The children acted with pure, innocent bravery. Mia and her loyal best friend Tommy rushed to Vinny's side as he shielded others from the immediate threat. Using a simple scout first aid kit and strips from an old American flag t-shirt, Tommy carried as a makeshift bandage, the children tended to a serious injury. Vinny sustained, while protecting the drivers, a reopened old wound from past conflicts that now bled heavily. Their small, gentle hands worked carefully, Mia whispering, "You're going to be okay. Like you helped us." Tommy, whose initial distrust had fully melted after previous acts of kindness, added softly, "You're not like the bad ones. You protect us." Vinny knelt, his powerful frame humbled by the children's care. The physical healing began in that moment, but the emotional healing struck deeper. Tears stung his eyes as the father-child bond surged with overwhelming force. The innocent kindness of his daughter and her friend tore through years of remorse, violently ripping open his guarded heart. In this condensed emotional stillness amid the chaos, Vinny broke down, realizing how his empire had unintentionally created more children like Mia and Tommy vulnerable and struggling. The second shocking twist hit with devastating clarity through discreet investigation triggered by the children's loyalty. It was revealed that Harlan had orchestrated the original circumstances years earlier that forced Vinny to distance himself from Elena, manipulating events to control Vinny's rise and keep him isolated. The betrayal was profound, exposing Harlan's greed as the root of much of the suffering. Elena reached them, horror and shock, nearly overwhelming her. She felt deep disorientation, numbness spreading through her body as dizziness and pain washed over her from the emotional intensity. Seeing her children heal the man who had rescued them and learning the truth of Harlan's manipulation left her inner world violently torn numb with disbelief, yet filled with a passionate, burning attachment and trust that consumed her. Tears flowed freely as the absurdity of her past misery collided with this moment of profound protection and revelation. You saved us from more than I ever knew," she whispered softly, voice timid yet filled with moving depth. Weeks later, the resolution solidified. Harlan's faction collapsed under the weight of exposed betrayal and lost support, his greed leading to his own downfall as associates turned away. Vinny used his influence to stabilize the routes, fairly dismantling the most harmful elements of his operations that had contributed to suffering. He committed resources to community programs that supported disadvantaged children like Mia and Tommy, ensuring medical care, education, and safe housing. The father-child relationship deepened beautifully. Mia and Tommy's innocent kindness continued to heal Vinny's emotional wounds, their drawings and stories of Chicago baseball games filling his once isolated brownstone with warmth. In quiet moments of condensed emotional stillness, Vinny sat with Elena and the children, his luxurious surroundings framed Cubs memorabilia, heavy oak furniture, and city lights now feeling meaningful because they were shared. His remorse had transformed into fierce responsibility, the violent inner conflict easing into profound peace as compassion triumphed over past choices. Elena held the children close during another peaceful night, her once painful poverty now a fading shadow. The overwhelming trust and attachment burned steadily, passionate and pure. The drama of her emotions had escalated to its peak, confusing, tearing, numbing, yet resolved into deep gratitude and hope. The second shocking twist and the children's healing acts had changed everything, exposing betrayal, while revealing the true power of kindness. The merger resolved not through dominance, but through fairness and redemption. Harlan fell from his own greed, while Vinny embraced a new path guided by the innocent hearts that had healed him. The father-child bond strengthened by Tommy's emotional turning point, and Mia's pure love brought healing to old wounds. Compassion from the most unexpected sources, the vulnerable children, and the resilient mother had triumphed, turning extreme hardship into a story of protection, responsibility, and profound emotional renewal. Warm sunlight streamed through the windows of the comfortable new home Vinny had helped secure for Elena Thompson and the children in a quieter Chicago neighborhood. The house was modest yet filled with simple comforts, a real kitchen, warm beds, and a small backyard, where the wind no longer cut like knives. Elena stood in the doorway watching Mia and Tommy play with a new baseball and glove under the gentle light. Her thin frame had begun to fill out slightly with regular meals, but the deep marks of years of extreme poverty remained etched in her memory. The malnourished nights, the sleep deprivation from constant worry, the humiliating desperation of choosing between rent and medicine, and the freezing wind that had pierced through every layer during countless cold evenings. Even now in safety, she sometimes felt the old powerlessness rise, leaving her anxious and guarded in quiet moments. Elena's voice stayed soft and timid as she called to the children. "Be careful with the ball, sweethearts. Come inside when you're ready for lunch." Her polite gentleness carried the weight of a mother who had once been utterly desperate, yet her heart now held a passionate, burning attachment that had grown from deep suspicion into overwhelming trust. The inner turmoil that had once torn her violently had begun to settle, though moments of numb disorientation still surfaced when she remembered how close they had come to breaking. Later that morning, Elena visited Russo's prime steakhouse one final time, not as a waitress but as a guest. The luxurious setting no longer felt mocking. Crystal chandeliers glowed warmly over mahogany tables, the rich aromas evoking comfort rather than unreachable distance. Vinny's wealth and power were displayed with quiet intensity through the successful resolution of his legitimate businesses, stable trucking routes that now protected workers and families rather than exploiting them. Yet for Vinny, the true richness lay elsewhere. Vincent "Vinny" Russo sat with Elena and the children in a private corner of the steakhouse, his commanding presence softened by deep emotion. His fair-skinned face showed the lines of past struggles, but his vast empire, now redirected toward fairness, generated millions, while allowing him to support community programs for disadvantaged children. His inner world, however, had reached its most intense emotional peak. The gnawing remorse that had once consumed him over the years Mia and Elena had endured such pitiful hardship now mixed with profound gratitude for the healing the children had brought. His paternal love for Mia burned with fierce protective passion, while his emotional upheaval toward Elena, the resilient woman who symbolized kindness against cruelty, created the most compelling focal point of his life. The violent inner conflict between his old life of power and the compassion awakened by the children had torn at him more deeply than any wound, leaving him in moments of extreme psychological shock and moving vulnerability. In the weeks following the final confrontation with Harlan, the emotional payoff unfolded gently yet powerfully. Harlan's greed had led to his complete downfall. His faction dissolved as associates turned away from his unreasonable and unjust tactics. No dramatic violence marked the end, only the quiet consequences of a man who had chosen cruelty over compassion. Vinny had used his influence to ensure fair resolutions across the routes, dismantling elements of his operations that had contributed to suffering and investing heavily in programs that supported families like the one he now cherished. The father-child bond shone brightly in small, everyday moments. Mia and Tommy sharing homemade apple pie made from a simple family recipe, drawing pictures that included Vinny as the protector and playing baseball in the park while telling stories of Chicago Cubs games. One quiet afternoon, another absurdly unfair echo from the past surfaced when an old creditor appeared at the new home making loud and unreasonable demands based on outdated claims. The incident exposed the lingering shadow of Elena's former misery in heartbreaking detail. She stood thin with remembered exhaustion, voice soft and timid as she faced the man. "We've come so far. Please understand." Horror and anxiety rose in her, a wave of dizziness and numbness threatening to overwhelm her as the old humiliation tried to resurface. Yet Vinny arrived calmly, resolving the matter with quiet authority and shielding them once more. The moment tore at Elena's heart, violently confusing, numbing, and filled with tears, as the disparity between her past powerlessness and Vinny's protective wealth became overwhelmingly clear. In that condensed emotional stillness afterward, she whispered to Vinny, her voice trembling with deep emotion. "You didn't just save us from the cold. You gave us back our hope." Vinny's remorse reached its most intense height in that moment. The powerful man who had once commanded fear and respect now felt the full weight of his past choices. Tears filled his eyes as he knelt to Mia and Tommy's level. "I spent years building walls to protect what I thought mattered. But you two, your kindness showed me what truly matters. I'm sorry for every cold night you endured because of the world I helped shape." The children's innocent response, small arms wrapping around him, began the final healing. Tommy, whose initial distrust had turned into deep loyalty, said softly, "You're our family now." Mia simply smiled and offered him her old baseball glove. "This kept me safe. Now it can keep you safe too." Later that night, in the peaceful quiet of the new home, the family gathered around a simple table. Vinny's luxurious brownstone now felt secondary to these moments. His heart, once torn by violent conflict and consuming guilt, found closure through the children's pure compassion. The second shocking twist, the revelation of Harlan's long-ago manipulation, had only strengthened his resolve to choose redemption. He spoke with moving depth to Elena. "Your strength raised our daughter through impossible hardship. Your kindness showed me the man I want to be. I will spend the rest of my days making sure neither of you, nor Tommy, nor any child like them ever feels that kind of cold again." Elena felt the final surge of overwhelming attachment. From the desperate, impoverished woman who had once whispered timid apologies to creditors, she had become someone protected and valued. Shock and deep disorientation still flickered when she remembered the extreme poverty, the thin nights, the hunger, the wind-filled despair, but they were now balanced by passionate trust and gratitude. Her inner world, which had been violently torn between fear and hope, finally settled into profound peace. Tears of release flowed as she held Vinny's hand briefly in thanks, her voice soft and polite. "You gave us more than safety. You gave us a future we never dared dream of." Weeks later, Vinny fully stepped back from the more dangerous aspects of his past, focusing his resources on legitimate businesses and community outreach. The programs he funded helped hundreds of vulnerable children, turning the pain of the past into purpose. Mia and Tommy thrived, healthy, laughing, and confident, their innocent kindness continuing to heal Vinny's deepest emotional wounds. The father-child relationship blossomed in simple American moments, family baseball games in the park, shared stories under the evening lights, and the warmth of a home where no one feared the next knock at the door. In the condensed, emotional stillness of one peaceful evening, Vinny sat with Elena and the children on the porch, the city lights glowing in the distance. His remorse had transformed into quiet strength, the violent inner tearing replaced by a deep, moving sense of redemption. Elena, once so pitifully poor and powerless, now radiated quiet resilience and gratitude. The disparity between her former life of humiliating scarcity and the security she now knew evoked tears of sympathy for the journey they had all traveled. 10 years later, the transformation was complete. Mia and Tommy had grown into confident young adults pursuing education and dreams once unthinkable. Elena led community programs with quiet wisdom, her voice still soft, yet now carrying the authority of experience. Vinny, no longer defined by power alone, found his greatest legacy in the family he had helped rebuild. Harlan's cruelty had faded into a distant lesson, while kindness had proven stronger than any empire. The story closed with a simple yet powerful moral: true strength lies not in wealth or dominance, but in compassion, protection, and the innocent hearts that can heal even the deepest wounds. Arrogance and greed, like Harlan, saw their own downfall. But quiet resilience, paternal responsibility, and the pure kindness of children can rewrite destinies. Elena's journey from desperate poverty to security, Vinny's transformation through remorse and love, and the children's role as healers reminded everyone that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one underestimated, and the greatest power comes from choosing humanity over cruelty. In the final quiet moment, as the family watched a Chicago Cubs game together, laughter filling the air, the emotional payoff was complete. The freezing winter of hardship had ended. What remained was warmth, healing, and the enduring bond between a powerful man who learned to protect a resilient mother who never gave up, and two children whose innocent kindness changed everything. 10 years later, the soft morning light of a Chicago spring filtered through the windows of a warm 2-story home in a peaceful neighborhood on the north side. Elena Thompson stood in the kitchen, the aroma of fresh coffee and homemade apple pie filling the air. She was no longer the thin, malnourished woman who had once endured freezing, wind-filled nights with nothing but threadbare blankets and empty cupboards. Her frame had filled out with years of proper meals and rest, yet the memory of that desperate poverty remained vivid. The humiliating nights of sleep deprivation, the powerless choices between medicine for her daughter and rent the absurdly unfair knocks at the door from creditors who treated her like she was invisible. Even a decade on those years could still bring a quiet wave of anxiety, leaving her momentarily guarded and reflective. Elena's voice remained soft and polite as she called upstairs. "Breakfast is ready, everyone. Don't let it get cold." Her tone carried the gentle warmth of a mother who had once whispered timid apologies to landlords and strangers, but now spoke with quiet confidence earned through resilience and unexpected kindness. Later that morning, the family gathered around the table. Mia, now a bright 18-year-old preparing for college, laughed as she teased her younger brother figure, Tommy, who had grown into a thoughtful 17-year-old with dreams of becoming a community coach. Vinny Russo sat at the head of the table, his powerful presence softened by time and healing. The wealthy and successful businessman still oversaw his legitimate trucking and construction empire, which had expanded responsibly and now employed hundreds while supporting local programs for at-risk youth. His wealth displayed itself not in flash, but in the quiet security it provided: good schools, reliable healthcare, and a home where no one feared the cold. Yet Vinny's inner world, even after 10 years, still held deep emotional layers. The gnawing remorse that had once violently torn at his heart over the years his biological daughter Mia and Elena had suffered in extreme poverty had transformed, but it never fully disappeared. It surfaced in quiet moments as a profound, moving gratitude mixed with lingering regret. His paternal love for Mia burned as fiercely as it had the day he first recognized her in that alley, a pure and protective force that had reshaped his entire life. His emotional upheaval toward Elena, the resilient woman who had raised his child through unimaginable hardship while symbolizing quiet kindness against cruelty, remained a compelling focal point. The violent inner conflict between his old world of power and the compassion awakened by the children had eased into a steady, deep sense of responsibility and peace, though it could still surge with intensity when he remembered how close they had come to losing everything. The family's morning was interrupted by a phone call that brought an echo of the past. An old associate from Vinny's earlier days appeared unexpectedly at the front gate, seeking one last favor tied to unresolved territory disputes from years ago. The request carried unreasonable pressure, stirring old tensions. Vinny stepped outside calmly, his commanding presence diffusing the situation without force. "Those days are behind us," he said firmly. "We protect families now, not old grudges." The brief confrontation heightened a momentary suspense, reminding everyone how far they had come, but it ended peacefully as the man left with a warning rather than a threat. Elena watched from the window, a flicker of old fear and anxiety rising in her chest. For a moment she felt the familiar numbness and dizziness, the mindset of someone who had once been desperately poor and powerless, suddenly protected by a wealthy, powerful man, still brought waves of emotional shock. Her inner world tore gently but intensely gratitude, clashing with the memory of those humiliating cold nights when she had been thin, sleep-deprived, and utterly alone. Yet the overwhelming trust and attachment that had burned passionately from the very first acts of protection now steadied her. She stepped outside, her voice soft and timid, yet steady. "Is everything all right?" Vinny turned to her, his blue eyes filled with deep emotion. In that condensed moment of emotional stillness, he took her hand briefly. "It's over. No one will ever put you or the children through that kind of hardship again." His remorse surged once more, violent in its honesty, as he remembered the years Elena had endured alone. The disparity between his wealth and her past poverty struck him anew, tearing at his heart with moving intensity. He had built millions through his empire, but the real legacy was the safety and opportunities he had helped create for this family. Weeks later, another unreasonable echo from the past tested them. A former creditor, unaware of how much had changed, sent legal papers demanding payment for long-forgotten debts from Elena's darkest years. The document arrived on a quiet afternoon, exposing the lingering shadow of her utter misery in heartbreaking detail. Elena sat at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she read the words. The humiliation felt fresh. The thin, malnourished nights, the sleep-deprived worry, the absurdly unfair cycle that had once stripped her of dignity. Horror and anxiety rose sharply, leaving her dizzy and numb, her inner world violently torn between the security she now knew and the memory of powerlessness. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered softly, "After everything, why does the past still try to reach us?" Vinny found her there. The powerful man who commanded respect knelt beside her, his own heart tearing with intense remorse and love. "This ends today," he promised. With quiet authority, he resolved the matter through proper channels, ensuring the old claim was dismissed fairly. In the stillness that followed, the family gathered. Mia and Tommy offered innocent comfort. Mia with a drawing of their new life, Tommy with his worn baseball glove, now a symbol of protection, passed forward. Their kindness healed the moment, turning potential pain into another layer of bonding. Later that night, as the city lights twinkled outside, Vinny sat with Elena on the porch while the children slept. The drama of their shared journey reached its deepest emotional rhythm. Vinny spoke with raw honesty, his voice low and filled with moving depth. I spent years haunted by guilt, knowing my choices contributed to a world where good people like you suffered cold nights and impossible choices. Seeing you and the children heal me, it's more than I deserve. His paternal love and protective attachment toward Elena created a profound focal point, not romance, but a fierce, responsible bond born from shared hardship and redemption. Elena listened, her emotions surging passionately. From the desperate, impoverished woman who had once felt invisible, she had grown into someone cherished and protected. The overwhelming trust that had ignited years earlier now burned steadily, intense, and pure. She felt shock and deep gratitude, a gentle wave of disorientation reminding her how far they had come. Her voice remained soft and polite. You didn't just give us a home, you gave us back our dignity. The children healed you, but you gave us the chance to heal together. 10 years had transformed their lives completely. Mia was thriving in her studies. Tommy had become a mentor to younger kids in the community programs. Vinny funded and Elena led outreach efforts that helped other mothers escape the cycle of poverty she once knew so intimately. Vinny's empire continued successfully, but its true measure was the lives changed. The vulnerable children who no longer endured wind-filled nights. The families given opportunities instead of fear. In the final, quiet, condensed emotional stillness of that evening, the family sat together watching an old Chicago Cubs game on television, laughter filling the room. Vinny looked at Elena and the children with tears in his eyes, his inner torment long eased into peace. The remorse that had once violently torn him apart had become the fuel for compassion. Elena, once so pitifully poor and powerless, now radiated strength and warmth. The children's innocent kindness had been the bridge that healed old wounds and exposed the true cost of greed. The moral closure was clear and deeply moving arrogance and cruelty, like Harlan's, always sow their own downfall. True power lies in compassion, protection, and responsibility. The most dangerous force is often the underestimated kindness of a mother's resilience and a child's pure heart. What began in desperation and cold nights had ended in warmth, healing, and a legacy that would touch many more lives. As the game played on and the family shared quiet joy, the emotional payoff felt complete. The freezing winter of hardship had given way to a spring of hope. Vinny had learned that the greatest empire is the one built on love and redemption. Elena had discovered that even the deepest poverty cannot extinguish the human spirit when met with unexpected protection. And Mia and Tommy had shown that the smallest acts of kindness can rewrite the hardest stories. In the end, the story reminded every viewer that no one is truly invisible, and that choosing humanity through quiet protection, fierce responsibility, and open hearts creates a legacy far richer than any fortune. 10 years later, gentle morning light bathed the cozy family home on Chicago's North Side, where laughter and the scent of fresh coffee mingled with the warm aroma of homemade apple pie cooling on the counter. Elena Thompson moved through the kitchen with quiet grace, no longer the desperately thin, malnourished woman who had once survived on scraps while enduring endless sleep-deprived nights, and the biting Chicago wind that cut through every layer of clothing. The memory of that absolute extremity of poverty still lived in her bones. The humiliating powerlessness of choosing between rent and medicine, the absurdly unfair creditor's demands, the cold nights when she had wrapped her daughter in the only blanket they owned. Yet today her frame was healthy, her eyes bright with hard-earned peace, though moments of old anxiety could still surface, leaving her momentarily guarded and reflective. Elena's voice remained soft and polite as she called the family to breakfast. "Come eat while it's warm, everyone. There is plenty for all." Her tone carried the gentle strength of a mother who had once whispered timid words of comfort in the face of overwhelming hardship. Later that morning, the family gathered around the table. Mia, now a confident young woman pursuing studies in social work, shared stories from her classes. Tommy, her loyal best friend who had become like a son, laughed as he recounted coaching younger kids in the community baseball league Vinny supported. Vincent Russo sat at the head, his powerful presence tempered by years of quiet transformation. His legitimate businesses in trucking and construction continued to thrive, successfully generating millions, while funding programs that helped vulnerable families escape the cycle of poverty. His wealth displayed itself with quiet intensity, not in extravagance but in the security, education, and opportunities it now provided for those who had once known only cold and want. Yet Vinny's heart still carried profound emotional depth. The gnawing remorse that had once violently torn through him over the years his biological daughter Mia and Elena had suffered in such pitiful conditions had evolved into a deep-moving gratitude mixed with lingering tenderness. His paternal love for Mia burned with the same fierce protective passion it had from the first shocking moment of recognition. His emotional upheaval toward Elena, the resilient woman who had raised his child through unimaginable hardship, while embodying kindness in contrast to cruelty, remained the most compelling focal point of his life. The violent inner conflict between his old world of power and the compassion awakened by the children had softened over time, yet it could still surge with intensity, reminding him how wealth and poverty could never truly separate love and compassion when hearts chose humanity over division. Love, he had learned, transcended every barrier of skin color or circumstance. The peaceful morning was gently interrupted when an old associate from Vinny's past appeared at the gate seeking advice on a lingering community matter. The encounter brought a brief, tense undercurrent of past conflicts, but Vinny handled it with calm authority, turning the moment into one of quiet guidance rather than confrontation. Elena watched from the window, a flicker of old fear rising before it dissolved into trust. In that condensed emotional stillness, Vinny returned and took a seat beside her, his presence a steady anchor. Weeks later, another unreasonable echo from the past tested their peace. A former creditor, unaware of how lives had changed, sent papers demanding payment for long-forgotten debts from Elena's darkest years. The document arrived unexpectedly, exposing once more the shadow of her utter misery. The thin, food-deprived nights, the sleep-deprived worry, the humiliating powerlessness that had once left her dizzy with despair. Elena sat at the table, hands trembling as waves of shock and confusion washed over her numbness, spreading through her body and bringing a painful disorientation. Her inner world tore violently for a moment. The mindset of someone once desperately poor, now suddenly surrounded by protection and love, still brought extreme psychological shock. Tears welled as she whispered, softly voiced, timid and polite. "After everything we have built, why does the past still try to reach out?" Vinny found her there. His heart tore with intense remorse and love as he knelt beside her. "This chapter is closed," he said gently. With measured care, he resolved the matter fairly through proper channels, ensuring no further burden fell on the family. In the quiet that followed, Mia and Tommy offered innocent comfort, a shared baseball game in the backyard, simple drawings and reminders that kindness had already rewritten their story. The children's gentle hearts continued to heal old wounds, showing that compassion could bridge any divide. Later that night, as the family sat together under the soft glow of evening lights, Vinny spoke with raw honesty. The inner tearing he had carried for so long reached a final moving peak. "I once believed power could protect me from pain, but it was your resilience, Elena, and the pure hearts of these children that taught me what truly matters. Wealth cannot separate love and compassion when we choose to see each other as human beings, regardless of skin color or station in life." Elena listened to her own emotions, surging with passionate intensity. From the impoverished woman who had once felt invisible, she had found overwhelming trust and attachment, a burning connection rooted in protection and shared humanity. Her voice remained soft as she replied, "You showed us that kindness has no boundaries." We healed together. As the years unfolded, the family's life grew richer in meaning. Vinny redirected more of his resources toward education and community support, helping countless children escape the cold nights Elena once knew. Mia pursued a career focused on helping families in need, while Tommy became a mentor who used baseball as a way to teach teamwork and resilience. Elena led outreach programs with quiet wisdom, her journey from desperate poverty to stability inspiring others. The story became a living testament that love and compassion could triumph over any divide of wealth or background. In every challenge they faced, the family drew valuable life lessons. They learned that true knowledge comes not from power alone, but from understanding another's suffering. They discovered that every lesson in humility strengthens the heart. Through shared struggles, they gained deeper education in empathy that no amount of money could buy. Another important lesson revealed itself in quiet moments of forgiveness, showing how compassion heals old wounds. They realized that real knowledge grows when we listen to those who have endured hardship. The greatest education often arrives through unexpected kindness from the vulnerable. One profound lesson was that love sees beyond skin color or circumstance. Another valuable knowledge emerged when they chose unity over division. A final gentle lesson taught them that protecting the innocent brings the deepest fulfillment. And through it all, they found that true education lies in opening the heart to humanity in every form. If this story touched your heart, the creator wishes everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. Thank you for joining this emotional journey. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with others, so we can bring many more engaging stories every day. How did this story make you feel? Does it connect to moments in your own real life? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. The creator truly wants to listen to the emotions from deep within your hearts. Disclaimer. All stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental. Goodbye for now, and we promise to see you again in the next video. Take care.